Welcome back to the I Am More Than podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Wessel. I'm a former Miss Arizona USA, professional model, and founder of More Than Inc. This week's guest has one hell of a story. My girl is known online as a confident blonde bombshell, dishing out low-carb recipes and all the beauty tips. But most people don't know the details of her journey to self-love. She got married at 19 because, in her words, she didn't know her own worth. She spent 5 years in a loveless marriage, but through the ups and downs, she fell in love with herself. Since then, she's lost over 80 pounds, built a powerful online community, and created a life she absolutely loves. I've decided to split our interview into 2 episodes. In this episode, she talks candidly about her marriage and the valuable lessons she learned through a very challenging season. Next week will be all about her weight loss journey. I've no doubt her story will not only inspire you, but empower you and remind you that it's never too late to take charge of your life. I'm so excited to introduce you to my dear friend, Jessica McGee. So welcome to the I Am More Than podcast, Jess. I am so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And a little fun fact about Jess and I is that our moms have been best friends since before either of us were born. So we've essentially been in each other's lives our whole life.
Right.
So we go way back. And a lot of people know you because of the strong community of followers that you've built on social media. I feel like you're this go-to gal for low-carb recipes and weight loss and beauty and humor and just all the wonderful things that you are. But I feel like you're just so much more than weight loss on top of it. And just knowing little snippets of your story, I just want to have your followers and anybody that's new to this podcast get to know you on a deeper level. So I'm really excited that you're here and that you're willing to be so open with us.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited too.
I know bits and pieces of your marriage when you were 19. Obviously, we weren't in the same state. We weren't really talking about what relationship statuses were looking like. But from what I was seeing from the outside, I know it was a relationship that you weren't planning on getting married at 19. That wasn't what you wanted for yourself, but it just kind of happened. Do you mind telling me a little bit about how you got into the position where you were married at 19? How did you meet him? What was that experience like for you?
Well, I will say I don't know if you it's so funny. I really wish that the listeners would know how much of fragments of each other's stories that we've had over the years, because I really don't know that you are even aware of how much this all intertwines. But so my mom and dad moved here to Arizona, and when I was 17, and I was still in college, and I had no idea what I was doing with myself, by myself. And when I came to visit for, I think it was just Christmas break, I only intended on being here for, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it was. And I came out of the living room one day and I asked my dad if he could take me to go to Colorado with me and help me bring all my stuff back. I just didn't think I did. Yeah, I just thought, okay, well, I'm just going to move now. And I'd like to live here. And I remember them just kind of being like, okay, okay. And I think my mom was really excited and my dad was just kind of like, okay, she needs me to do something and I'm willing and I'm able, so we will. We never sat down and really thought it all the way through. We just did it. So we flew back to Colorado, got a U-Haul and drove my stuff back that weekend. And I moved here to Arizona, where I thought it was amazing because I had never seen a palm tree in my life. And it's February now at this point, and I'm like, this is so cool. I'm on vacation every day. But then I started to realize I didn't have friends, right? I didn't have high school friends. I couldn't go to Walmart and run into my girlfriends, or go to the mall and run into people, or just have this casual, I don't want to do anything but just lay on your couch while you do other things. I didn't have that type of friendship. Wow. And so I fell in love so fast with anything and everything that could feel like it was going to be permanent. And I wonder all the time what I was thinking, but I remember how I felt when I moved here. And I remember that I just didn't know very many people. So,
and you were isolated from what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was. And I had a lot of jobs. I've always been somebody who had a lot of jobs. So I just worked. And then I met a boy and we were married within 3 weeks.
Holy crap. I didn't realize it was that soon.
It was
Oh
that
my gosh.
soon.
Okay, let's unpack that. So you go on your first date and was he upfront about it or was it like on a whim? How did this happen?
I met his friend,
Okay.
and then we went to like this house party. Long story short, my at the time future husband was there, and he was taller and cuter. I'm 5'10", and the guy that
Oh, so
I
you
had
need
the guy I showed up to the house party with was I don't 5'7", and I was like, man, yeah, I was a little bit I was a little confused. We had met sitting down. Anyway, so I I met his taller, cuter friend, and I actually didn't want to give him my number. I knew what that would look like, just switching in that moment, in that instant. But he convinced me to give him my number, told me he would never call me. Then he called me every day,
of
and
course.
we went to the first time, our first date. I'll just be honest, it was like this bar. I was underage. I just was enamored with the glitz and the glamour. He gave the bouncer $100 bill, and I wasn't even allowed to be there, but I was like, oh, this is just the life. I felt like a
Wow.
royalty. And then I found out, I don't know how much of this you know.
I don't know much, to be honest. I know about the wedding, and I don't know anything prior to the wedding. So I am intrigued. Give me the dirty details. Let's hear it.
So, okay. Well, so the truth is, I found out that he wasn't a citizen, but he had a really interesting story. He was brought here at 14, and
Where from?
from Jordan.
Oh, wow.
And he was Catholic in a relatively Muslim country. I believe, from my limited knowledge, I believe it's pretty westernized, and but in the area that he lived in, it was definitely predominantly Muslim, and he was a Christian. His family relocated and moved here, but he wasn't a citizen. And his intent at some point was to acquire citizenship.
Did you know that early on or no?
I did know. I don't love the way that it sounds, because it sounds like, especially with our knowledge now of like 90 Day Fiance, of like this, meeting and like bringing together with the intent of like duping the system. I did know that he didn't have citizenship and that he would need it. But what I also believed in my heart, although hindsight's 2020, but what I believed in my heart at the time, being unknowing, being 19 years old, being brand new in a city that I didn't live in, and being somebody who just wanted to have a base and a familiarity and a group and people, and I
Absolutely.
totally believed that he was in search of, kind of quote unquote, in search of somebody to fill a void that he was looking for anyway. That he wanted to get married. He didn't want to get married twice. He didn't want to get married for this. He wanted to get married. He knew that this was a kind of a means to an end. Firmly believed that had he not needed citizenship, it probably wouldn't have been an urgent factor. I don't
Gotcha.
think I don't think he would have been like, absolutely, we need to get married.
Yeah.
But I also firmly believe he had no intentions of leaving me after acquiring the citizenship, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And I think it's really important for everybody to listen to that doesn't know Jess, your age. You're 19 at the time. Like you
Right.
said, you're new to a brand new place. You meet this tall, 6 foot something handsome man that wows you. So I think
Right.
it's really important to set the scene that yes, hindsight is absolutely 2020 and
For sure.
obviously you've learned so much from it, but I do think it's really important for people to realize like where you're at that time.
Sure. Oh,
Like
I
you would
mean,
have no way of knowing.
100%. And at that time, I mean, this is also, we're now in an age where 90 Day Fiance is on TV, and you can be like, duh, you know what I mean? Or all of these different things have now happened.
Yeah.
And at the time too, I mean, just to paint that picture even further, I was firmly believing he was my Aladdin. Like,
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
going to get a magic carpet, and we were going to do this, and we were going to see the world.
Yeah.
And I thought for sure that this was my ticket to the world, that this was my romance, that this was my perfect storm, and that it just, I also thought, as naive as it sounds, that if it wasn't supposed to happen, it wouldn't. Like
Totally.
something would happen, like
Totally.
something for
And
sure, because everything happened for a reason, back
yeah,
then.
and fate and,
Yeah.
like you can kind of play those tricks on your mind thinking like, well, then obviously this is what I'm supposed to be doing or it wouldn't be falling on my lap right now.
Oh,
And
100%.
if we fast forward a little bit, were you in any serious relationships growing up prior to this time?
I was in serious relationships, but finding a man who needed me was not out of character. I didn't have anybody else in my life to challenge my beliefs, my thoughts, my feelings. I didn't have somebody else telling me how not to do things, or being in my space, being challenging my conclusions. Even now in interactions where you do have those, and I understand with a different perspective, and so many years of experience under my belt now, I'm able to have conversations where I can see other perspectives, but I never had anything that challenged my thoughts. So if I believed it at 19, it was true
Yeah.
in my core.
And I think that is so relatable to so many people, especially when you're young and you think you know,
Oh
and you
yeah.
think you know exactly what your gut is telling you. And like you said, if you weren't challenged, you had no other way to think. And I'm assuming that the first couple weeks of your guys' relationship were probably pretty fairy tale. So
A
you had no
hundred
reason
percent.
to think that
Oh,
this was not a good decision for you at the time.
for either of us. For him, it was fairy tale. The funny thing is, for what it's worth, we were married for 5 years, which was a really long time for somebody
Yeah,
that you
that's a
meet after
really
three
long time.
weeks.
Yeah.
We didn't start his citizenship paperwork. We got married in September. No, sorry, we got married in July. We didn't start his citizenship paperwork or any of that until December that year, because it really wasn't the priority. Our
Yeah.
relationship at the time truly was. And trying to build a relationship that we could have forever together, that was the goal. Um, but I came from a place where I didn't know any better. And he came from a place where meeting people and getting married in that way was so normal. Just to back up, his sister and his sister's husband at the time, they met the day they got engaged, and that was all
Wow.
arranged. That was in Jordan, only a year before he and I ended up getting married. So he was following suit in a very traditional way, in a very like, you meet, you choose to be together, and you spend the rest of your life falling in love. For me, this took out all of the guesswork. This was like, I don't have to worry about the rejection or the uncertainty or the games of who's going to text me back and who's not going to text me back, which still existed
Yeah.
10 years ago. Those things unfortunately haven't changed, but that existed, which meant that I felt, and I think I can say this with honesty and clarity now, but I think I felt like that was almost easier than having, like, if he was going to promise to love me forever, and he was going to promise to be my husband. The only husband I ever knew was my dad, and he was awesome. So I expected he would be my husband in the definition that I had of a husband. What we missed was that whole first part of seeing if we had the same definitions, seeing if we
Yeah.
understood, right, and if we had the
Well, but
same
like
goals.
you said, hindsight is always 2020.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
also when you're that young, you don't think to have those long-term conversations and really
Mm-mm.
do the work. But I also think it's really interesting that you guys had two completely separate cultural experiences. And I
Mhm.
think it's cool that you were able to respect it to such a degree that you didn't challenge it. But I
Mhm.
also want to know kind of what that was like being in a completely different,
Mhm.
it's almost like a culture shock.
Oh my
And
gosh, I
now
tell
you're
everybody
getting married
now.
to him.
Yeah, I tell everybody now I was a foreign exchange student for like 5 years.
Yeah, seriously. And I think I've heard from your mother, so I'd love to hear it in your words about what the proposal wedding experience was
Oh
like, because
my
this is
gosh.
3 weeks in, and I think this gives people a pretty good idea of how different it was and where you were at that time.
Oh my gosh. I worked for my mom at the time, and we for just to paint that picture, there was three people in this company. I was one of them, she was the other. And then there was
Love it.
and then there was the owner. And so this poor guy had, the owner had the two of us, and it was Monday, and I told my mom that I thought I was going to get married, and I remember her saying, "To who?"
Oh,
Like,
so she hadn't even met him.
she did. She
Oh,
did.
Jessica.
Oh, she did, but she just wasn't like fully convinced. Like it was also in a time where I was like, there was a lot going on in my world. So, there was different names and different people and she just didn't know where everybody fit. So she was
Yeah.
like, wait a second, help me understand. So wanted to get married, and I did. I told her on Monday, "Do you think that his family could come over tonight, and do you think you could make lasagna?" And she was like, "What?"
Bless her
And
heart, because she did it.
she did. No, she 100% did it. And here's the thing. So his family, my ex-husband's family, they wanted to honor those traditions. They wanted to come and formally ask my family for my hand. And
Wow.
they had gold, and they had gifts, and they had their entire extended family, none of whom speak any English at this time. I mean, very, very broken.
Oh my gosh.
Very, very broken. And my sweet dad and my sweet mom, who just are
Who are
super
just
new to
doing their best to
Arizona.
support you.
They don't have any idea. Yeah, for sure. They answer the door, and this, little Jordanian family is like, "Hi." Here we are. And I'm like, "It's okay. I know them. They're with me." And we all go into the living room, and we eat. Like, we have like a full-on dinner, and we all sit in the living room. And my husband got up, and he talked to my dad. My father-in-law at the time talked to my dad. My mother-in-law at the time talked to my mom and dad, and they basically set their intentions. They, we would like to welcome Jessica into our family. We would like to take her and bring her into our home, and give her our last name, and we would like these things, and we promise to love her and cherish her and respect her. And my mom said, "You damn well better." And I said,
Oh.
"Don't worry, I got this. I'm going to be totally fine." And we got married on that Wednesday.
And this was a Monday.
Yeah. So Monday we had
Oh.
lasagna, and we got married on Wednesday.
Oh my gosh, what a whirlwind. Girl. But when you said he was like you're Aladdin, like that sounds like it.
Hmm.
It's a whirlwind, it's exciting, there's
Hmm.
gold, there's people that are promising to love you. Like
Forever.
I forever?
I didn't even love myself. And you want to tell me that all these people are going to love me for a whole lifetime? Yes, yes, and yes. I didn't have, any type of like sibling. I just was like, "Mom, this whole family loves me. And I'm really going to do this." And you know what the truth
Wow.
is? She was worried I was going to do it anyway.
Yep.
So she supported me.
Which I think is unbelievable of her to have that much wisdom at that time to know that, like, either we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I can fight her and try and stop her, and she'll do it anyways, or I can just love her and support her unconditionally. And I think that's really cool. That says a lot about your mom.
It does. I
It really
sometimes
does.
I feel so bad for her. And knowing that she's the empath that I am, she went through everything I did.
Yeah, well, in the beginning, it was exciting. And
For sure.
the
Everyone
wedding,
was excited. We'll tell you this. We loved each other as much as either of us possibly could love the other person.
and at that time, with the information that you had, obviously you were giving everything. You were giving your entire life to this person.
Mhm.
And do you think that you truly knew your own self-worth and yourself well enough at that time
No. I'm so different. Everything about my life then reminded me of that little girl that used to tell people, this is who I am. I'm never going to be petite. I'm never going to be this. I had limitations on myself all the time. I was this, and I'll never be any more, and I'll never be any better, and I'll never be. And because this is who I am, this is where I belong.
Wow.
I thought it was important to be that way. I thought
Yeah.
knowing myself was
Yep.
accepting myself. I thought it was having really hard, honest conversations to myself about how those limits exist and about how I'm not capable, about checking myself and telling myself, don't do that. That's not who you are. You're here. You're in this box. You stay there. And that's what I thought I was doing myself a favor by just trying to fully be that and not something else, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. And I do want to know throughout, because you had 5 years of marriage. That's a long
Mm-hmm.
time for anybody's
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And I know that you went into the marriage planning on that being your one and only time getting married. And he did the exact
Mm-hmm.
same thing. Do you
Mm-hmm.
feel like things changed drastically quickly? Or do you think it was gradual over time when you started realizing, like, hey, I don't think this is where I'm supposed to be?
It was gradual because there was never a day that I wasn't willing to fight for it. So, you know, we talk about how much he loved me and how much I loved him and how I didn't know that, this was going to end because it didn't start the way other marriages that are starting that way now, right? Or it wasn't like that. So we talk about that, but at the same time, just to kind of give everybody else who's listening some insight, I was in a very loveless marriage. My husband was not. He didn't spend time with me. Our cultures, those cultures, if we both just went on our natural frequencies, we would never collide. We would have never naturally had any reason to like have a relationship, and not just culturally, but just how our natural, like my culture has these sort of things in place where like women and men intermingle at parties and women and men do these types of things that made so much sense to me, and how it was for him was so different that if we both just lived our lives normally, we would have never crossed paths, or even as a marriage, because I was the woman and he was the man. And that was easy for me because there was rules and I didn't have to feel upset for him not wanting to spend time with me because it was part of the way that, everything worked.
Was that shocking to you that men and women, just the cultural differences, honestly, because it's not one's better, one's worse. It's just that's the way that things are in those two different cultures. Was that shocking to you when you are now married to him and you had this one idea of what marriage would look like? He had a completely separate idea. Was that confusing to you right away?
Right.
Did you try to change it or did you just kind of accept it?
I think all of those things. It was confusing to me. Again, so we're looking at life from my very uneducated, narrow mind at 19. My thought and expectation is that it would naturally, organically evolve into what I expected for myself. I didn't know what it would look like or how. But when we talked about naming our kids, for example, I'll never forget that conversation when we were all collectively together, my family, his family, and we started talking about how we were going to name our kids, and he mentioned that our children, regardless of the gender, would have his first name and his middle name and his last name. So we would get to pick one of four names, and three of them would be given to him by the father. And that would be automatic, regardless of gender. And when I realized that this wasn't going to look the way I thought, was when I said, but can't we do something different? Why does it have to be that way?
Yeah.
Can we mend it? Can we change it? Can we tweak
We
that?
start something new.
Right.
Yeah.
To fit
Yeah, which is
us.
a fair question. That's fair. How did he respond to that?
Absolutely not. If I were to tweak that, then I were basically neglecting the tradition. I mean, there was no compromise. Like you do or you don't. And if you don't, then I was just ignoring it. I was making it Americanized.
Wow. That's
That's
a
when I
tough
started to
position to be
realize.
in.
But that's when I started to realize that it wasn't going to look the way that I thought it was, that we didn't actually have. I originally and initially, I thought it would evolve to that no matter what. I thought every long-term marriage was happy. I thought that they all ended up having these, dialogues where everybody heard everybody and like the speaking stick was passed. I thought my mom and dad have a phenomenal relationship. I'm not sure if you've ever witnessed, but like
Yeah,
they
they're pretty
just,
amazing.
and it's sick. And I thought that that's what every long-term relationship was, just inevitably, like I would get there. And so I thought that his parents, who were in a longer relationship, and his brother and sister, or who had only been married for a year, but his brother-in-law and his sister, and all these different people around us who had longer relationships, who had started their relationships in similar ways to how we did, had found solutions to the problem. So I thought it was just a matter of us finding those same solutions, but that we would get to that same place inevitably, because I thought we both wanted that. But what I realized at some point was if we both got what we wanted, it wouldn't be that.
Wow. That's so interesting. And do you feel like you had anybody to talk to? Because you were really with his family almost all the time, weren't you?
All the time. I lived with them. Yeah.
Oh, you lived with his family?
I lived with them.
Oh, goodness. So you guys didn't like get married and get a place and isolated just as a couple. So you married a whole family within a matter of a
Remember?
couple days.
Yeah. I went and stayed at
Wow.
their house. I had never shared a closet. I had never shared anything. And now all of a sudden I was sharing a dresser
Wow.
and a
How many people were
bedroom.
you living with?
5
Wow.
and a baby. His sister had a baby.
That's
But
shocking.
for me, it was this dream come true. You can hear it again, and I hear it now, even just thinking of like myself with a future 19-year-old, like, what in the actual hell were
Yeah.
you doing? But at the same time, was, I felt like adopting into this family, and they knew me, they loved me, that really never really changed. That was something. I think that was something that actually even propelled my confidence in the future, was seeing how much they loved me, how amazing they thought I was. And again, we had our ups and downs. We were a family and we began to act and and look like one. So we had our ups and downs, but they loved me and cherished me so much that I just thought that at first I thought they were the only ones that ever would, until I started to wonder what they saw that I couldn't.
Do you think that because of that love, you were able to then like look internally and be like, okay, I got to work on some stuff so that I can learn how to love myself? Do you think that
Hmm.
sparked it?
Yeah, 100%. So you asked if I ever had anybody to talk to, and I had my friends from high school who were always so supportive, and they were just kind of the mindset that, like, when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you'll get out of this. And my mom, I had talked to her all the time, and how she guided me was always sort of different. It really depended on the content of the problems that we were having. But my father-in-law at the time was the one who I talked to the most. I would sit with him probably, I mean, hours and hours and hours. And sometimes we'd laugh and sometimes we would cry together, and there were
Wow.
a lot of times where he would be the only person. He had a much better understanding of English than most of the other people in his family. So he and I really connected. I helped him with a lot. He helped me with a lot. And he taught me how to he did teach me how to love myself. I remember the day that I decided I was going to leave, and I told my father-in-law first. I
Oh my
said,
gosh.
it's my turn, and I'm going to take care of me now. And he looked at me and said, "Okay."
Wow.
Hmm.
That's amazing. And I'm sure that that kind of brought you the comfort that you needed, because I'm sure not everybody's response was as loving.
Hmm. I thought, well, for so many years, he had, you know, I had never come to that final of a conclusion before, but he had always guided me in a way that was like, your relationship is the most important thing and your marriage is the most important thing, and you need to focus on that. But as I think, even as he started to love me more, and as I started to grow on him more, and as we started to have an independent relationship outside of just my marriage, but just, another, I was like his daughter. He helped me to see that I was equally as important in that relationship, and that he understood if I were going to take steps to make me happy, it would be in another direction.
That's really cool. And that's after 5 years of marriage. And like you said, it was kind of a loveless relationship in regards to your husband. It sounds like with his family, you kind of built an even stronger connection with them. What was the final kind of straw for you to be like, okay, I need to remove myself from the situation? It no longer is going to be, I need to grow. I can be more separate from this relationship. What kind of gave you that confidence that you could go in a separate direction?
I think I probably got the answer I needed 6 months before I was willing to listen. I remember when his cousin, who had come from Australia to visit, he was also very, I'm going to say Americanized, but everyone knows what I mean.
Yeah.
Obviously Australianized, but like, just not Middle Eastern, in the sense that he had very traditional outlook and values. And so his cousin had a totally different view in the world and came to America, absolutely fell in love with me. And I just started to sort of, I think things kind of came together at that point, like realizing that I was the common denominator in this like circle of awesomeness. Like, this is me. Everybody,
Hell yeah.
I am the one that that people like and that people are drawn to, and that and of course it makes sense that they would love me and that he would love me and that all of these different people would love me. And you know what he said to me? He said, "What the hell are you doing here?"
That had to hit home pretty hard.
Totally.
Did you have an answer?
No. But
Oh,
I didn't have the balls to go,
yeah.
and I didn't know what I was going to do or where I was going to go. I had no idea. But he just asked me, "What are you doing?" That was in November, and then I left in July. So it took me a long time to really make sure that I had done what I needed to do to walk away and feel like I had given the effort that I was proud of. I needed some time to answer some of the questions I had. What am I going to do? Well, you're going to go live at your mom's house. Well, where am I going to work? You're going to keep the job that you have now. It's just going to take you longer to get there. Well, what about my last name? You're going to change it. But it took me 6 months to figure that out and answer those questions for
Wow.
myself, because I was 24 years old and I was getting ready to start over and get rid of every single person I knew. And I knew that when I walked away, it was going to be, some people get to walk away and have mutual friends. And I don't mean, I say get to, I'm sure there's a lot of struggles in that too. But when I walked away, I knew that I deleted my Facebook and I never reactivated again. I knew that I was disappearing when I walked away from them.
Oh my gosh. And I think so much of your story in bits and pieces sounds similar to some of the others that I've heard from guests solely by being in that toxic relationship, that so many people will ask the same question, like, okay, well, then why didn't you just leave? And it's like, it's not that easy. Your life is so intertwined. And like you said, you had this idea of one marriage and then restarting your life at 24 years old. I think that it's a really good takeaway for anybody listening here, that like, it's one, not too late to start over. And also, you can always choose yourself. It's not always easy,
Hmm.
but you can always choose yourself. And I think it's really admirable that you not only took that time, but you took that time to kind of close one chapter and know fully what you were getting into with your next chapter. I think that's hard for a 24-year-old to wrap their mind around.
Totally. And I think that there's a benefit in being, 24 and still having so much life ahead of you, but being 24 and already having gone through divorce was also another totally different challenge in and of itself that I didn't know how I was going to explain, because that day when I was 24 years old and I walked out, I knew that I married him because I didn't love myself enough. So I didn't know how I was going to ever tell somebody else that that's why I made that decision. I settled. And I did it because I was too fucking scared of trusting myself. I stuck with the first person who promised to love me forever because I didn't want to find out what would happen if I had to try. I didn't want to deal with rejection. I didn't want to deal with the ups and downs. I didn't want to deal with getting my heart broken. I wanted the recipe. And I thought that this person said they would love me forever. I thought that I could be with anybody forever. I'm great. I just didn't realize
I
that I
literally have
also need.
chills all over my body right now. Like,
I have tears in my
oh my
eyes.
gosh. I do too.
I wish I could hug that girl 10 years ago.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you. Do you think there's anything you could have said to her? Or do you think that you needed to go through that experience?
I am so terrified that there's nothing I could have said to her because I I don't know what I'm going to say to my future daughter. Had I known how lovable I am, and had I known how long life is, I know life is short. I know life is short, but life is also so long. And I didn't know it then. And if I had known it then, I think I would have understood the impact of some of the decisions I was making that were lifelong. And I I think if I would have known those things, I could have made a better decision. So I don't think I'm going to stop. I don't think I'm going to be able to stop my daughter from making a decision if she gets herself in that situation, but I hope I've given her skills. And I don't blame my mom because she didn't have them. She learned those after. My mom lost 120 pounds after I met and married my ex-husband. So, if anything, while there were so many things that she wasn't able to protect me from, had she not chosen herself, had she not chosen had to do that hard thing and show me how, I don't think I would have ever known. I had never seen anybody go through a significant weight loss transformation until I was 23 years old and watched my mom lose 120 pounds. And I don't think I would have trusted that I could change either had I not. So as much as she, you know, let me make a terrible mistake, she also paved the way for my future all over again and opened her door. I remember calling her and I told her I want to come home. And she said, okay. And to give you asked why, so I'll just kind of go back. He used to go out and play cards all the time, and call me naive, but I know he wasn't with women. He was just literally playing cards. That was the funniest thing, when I said that if we just kind of went on our own paths, we would have never crossed, because he wanted to go play cards with guys. He didn't give a wild rat's ass about emotionally connecting with a woman in a way that fed her internally. Like that, being a life partner meant I come home, I eat dinner, I go play cards. Like,
Wow.
and like, you be home when I get home, very primal. And there was just so that was the loveless part of our marriage. We just didn't have this connection. But he played cards, and there was one morning where he wasn't home and I had to go to work, and it was, I think, like 7 a.m. and I knew he hadn't even gotten home yet. And this wasn't the first, second, third, fourth, fifth time that it had happened, but for the first time in 5 years, I didn't care where he was.
Oh my goodness.
I wasn't confused. I wasn't curious. I wasn't worried. I literally didn't even care. I wasn't even like mildly annoyed. I was just like, ugh, it was just more like,
Yeah.
okay, like, okay. And I remember calling my mom. I just made the decision right then and there. And I called my mom and I said, I want to come home. And she knew what I meant. And there were so many times in the past where I knew what she would say. She always used to tell me, if you're safe, you're staying there. That's your home. If he's not hurting you, if he's not beating you, you can't leave if you're going to go back. He's not going to respect you. You can't leave if your intention is for him to chase you. He's not going to respect you. You can't leave if you're hoping that next week or next month that your relationship is better. That's not going to serve you. So I told her I wanted to come home. And she said, if you come back here, you can't leave. And I said, I know.
Wow.
And she said, okay.
Wow.
And she was at my house at 7 o'clock in the morning with a U-Haul and a padlock for, she went and at 7 o'clock in the morning, she already drove 45 minutes down to my house and stopped off at U-Haul and got me a storage locker. She was like,
Oh,
we are
she was
ready. We're ready
determined.
for you.
She's like, all right, let's go.
100%.
Wow. I'm sure that had to feel a mixture of emotions, but you also had to feel free. Like you
That
had
was
made a
all I felt.
decision that you felt confident in.
That was all I felt. For the first time, I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew it was right.
That's
And
incredible.
everything worked. Everything was like coming together as it should. It was easy. Like my boxes were fitting perfectly. I decided I was going to do some laundry before I left because I know it sounds crazy. People are like, "What is this bitch doing laundry before she's leaving her husband?" I I didn't want him to ever look back and justify the way he treated me. And I never wanted him to look back and say I deserved it. And I knew that if I left and I acted the way I wanted to, that he would only choose to remember that. And he would never remember what he did. He would never remember the lack of effort and he would never remember the terrible parts. And I would. And I didn't want to give him the benefit of forgetting those.
I have
So I cleaned the
chills again.
house. I cleaned the
Wow.
house. I replaced all the pictures in the walls with pictures of him and his friends. And I didn't make it as if I just left. I made it as if I was never there. And it timed out perfectly. Like the clothes, I spread them throughout the entire closet. And it was like my stuff never should have been in there. It was incredible how it just came together as I moved out, as I just took the stuff. I left some boxes, some things that I knew I didn't want to carry and I wasn't going to do anything
Yeah.
with. But other than that, it looked better without my stuff in it, and it felt better in the house without my stuff in it. And my room in my mom's house felt better, it being smaller, being just my stuff. I
Yeah,
didn't
it's
grow up in
yours.
that house, but it was all my stuff. Yeah.
And you're saying the only feeling you felt was free. What did that feeling stay days, weeks, months after? Like, did you know in your heart fully that you had made the right decision and you were optimistic about the next step?
hmm I was 100% so confident. I was so confident that I made the right decision, but I was so terrified still of letting him. I didn't want him to ever feel like I deserved it. I really wanted to leave on that note that was, that strong power note that I felt like I left on, and I carried that through. So one of the things that was interesting, I never turned that switch off. I never got to, you know, say like, well, my true feelings about everything at the time, I always just remained very stoic in his presence, because I never wanted him, I just never wanted him to think that I had any doubts, and I never wanted him to think that I was like emotional or unstable, or I just knew that he would find these like little very easy conclusions to draw and be like, this is it, she's nuts. I'm not worried, like, so if there was any instability, I never ever showed anything but being, just very stoic in front of him. Even the day that our divorce was finalized, he showed up at the court, and I remember I remember he was yelling at me. So one thing we didn't cover for a lot of people listening, I actually speak and read and write Arabic. It
Of
was something
course you do. That's incredible.
it was something
Because
I
you were
thought was so
thrown
important to
in.
learn. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I thought, well, I mean, I'm not single-handedly going to be able to change this dynamic. I'm not even able to convince him to change the middle name for our kids. I'm this far in. I'm gonna have to learn. And if I want to know what they're talking about and I'm in the same room, I'm gonna have to learn. And I did. I used to sit down and I would write before he would go out with his friends, I would write on a pen and paper what I thought he said, like in letters, just spelled things phonetically. So if he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go out. I'll meet you there in 5 minutes," he would say that in Arabic to his friends. I'd write it down, and then I'd run downstairs and ask my mother-in-law, "What is this?" And I would just kind of like choppy like say it, and she would
Oh my
she
gosh.
would translate, and then I would start to figure things out. And eventually, like, people always say, if you submerge yourself in this culture, that you'll pick up the language. And I never used to like totally understand that. Like, how are you going to go to Mexico and just all of a sudden know what they're talking about? That doesn't make any sense. But when you have a 4'11" Arabic woman yelling at you to shut the window because she's cold, eventually you're going to figure out what she's talking about. And you're like, okay, okay, I'll shut the
I
window.
got
I'm
it.
sorry. So I learned how to speak and read and write Arabic. And at the court date, at the day that we decided, or that the day that the marriage was being dissolved, I remember I had a tear in my eye and it started to fall down my cheek. And I think you and I have talked about this before, because I remember, actually, it might have even just been your sister, but I remember when he turned and looked at me, I had a tear in my eye, and then I started to smile. And he started screaming at me in Arabic. So of course, no one else can understand, and I'm just standing there, and like there's, these court professionals and a judge, and he's like yelling at me in Arabic, and he was like, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" And he's like, "Shamalik inti," and I'm like, I just turn and I look at him, and I was like, "Nothing," and he was like, "Well, why are you laughing?" And I said, "I'm just smiling because this is the last time you will ever see me cry."
Girl,
And
you've
he
given me
followed me.
chills more time in this episode. Like, these are constant goosebumps. And did you say that to him in Arabic?
No, in English. I wanted everybody to
Wow.
hear
So
it.
oh my gosh, girl. That's incredible. Okay, so then what happens?
So we leave, and we leave the courtroom, and he follows me, and he is like trying to give me money, and he's like, "Why didn't?" Because so background, I did all of our citizenship paperwork myself. I did all of our. He owned a couple of businesses. I built them all, like all of the how to make a business, like I did all of these little things, all the paperwork, all of the legal process of it myself. I did our divorce myself. I don't know if it's me being savvy or me being cheap or what, but I thought, there's I don't need to learn how to be a lawyer. I just need to learn how to do this one thing, and I'm sure I can learn. So I just give me a minute and the computer, and I'll figure it out. And so I did our divorce, and he was like, the reason he went was because he wanted to see how things were going to divide out. He was really nervous that I was going to ask for half of his business, which, for what it's worth, I was entitled to, right? We
100%.
were
Yeah.
we were married, but I knew that if I asked for any of the business, it would jeopardize his ability to provide for the other 5 people that were living in that house. And at the time then there was an extra person. His other sister ended up getting married. So there was like literally so many people
Oh
in that
my
house.
goodness.
And it was a big, beautiful house, by the way. It was gorgeous. 2 master bedrooms. Everybody had some sense of like privacy, and it felt like we were all kind of destined and supposed to live there. But yeah, when we decided that we were going to get divorced, he was very, very concerned that I was going to ask for half of his business, and I didn't want it. I didn't want the potential liabilities. I didn't want anything good that came out of it. I just didn't care. I didn't want it.
You were done.
I'm totally done. So I didn't ask for it. When my mom and dad came to pick me up, I gave my dad the keys to his BMW, and I told him, "Follow me home in this. It's in my name."
Oh my goodness.
We're good. I don't need anything else. And that's what I asked for. I said, "You can just give me this, and I'll use." It was an older BMW that it was only worth enough money to pay off the credit card debt that he left me with, but I got to keep my 401k, and he didn't even know what the hell that was. So I thought I was getting out of there scot-free. I didn't care about his business. And I remember him asking, "Why didn't you take everything? Why didn't you send me back to Jordan?" And I laughed, and I was like, "Well, you already lost the best thing that you will ever have."
Hell yes. That's a mic drop moment right there. How good did that
Right?
feel to
I
say
mean,
to
I
him?
couldn't have said anything else. And
No, you couldn't have.
and now I've got that memory that I always said that on that day in the courtroom on with all these emotions around me, and I chose that. And so to answer your question, this is a very long answer, but did I feel anything? I never felt any doubt. I knew. I felt a little bit afraid of changing my name. Like I was like, "Oh shit," I just want to have those conversations that was like what led to you getting your last name changed. So there was certain things like that kind of took me a little while, but I was excited about dating again once I thought like I can do this, and
Yeah.
once I went back blonde. I used to have long, dark, black hair. He loved girls with black hair. I don't know why he married me. He loved girls with black hair, so I thought I would be a girl with black hair. And
Oh my
the
goodness.
next day after I left, I went and I started working on getting my blonde back.
Hell yeah. It really sounds like you discovered your power and you knew your self-worth, and it just
Mhm.
didn't stop.
Right.
Like you realized that you are completely unstoppable and you took charge of your life in every aspect.
For sure. If anything, I had to hide him from that power, right? I think maybe that's where that stoicism
Yeah.
sort of came in. I was like, I can't let him know what I'm capable of. I can't let him know any of this. Like, I just have to remain as blank, and I didn't want him to be able to figure me out. And that's what I did. Once I realized what I could do, I couldn't let him have that power over me anymore. I just had to get out.
And this was how many years ago?
It was 8 years ago.
8
This was
years ago.
8 years ago, like within the week.
And look at all that's happened in your life in the last 8 years.
Mhm.
Because I think that you and I, like I said in the very beginning of this episode, we've been a part of each other's lives our whole lives, but we haven't ever been together in really the same state. We
Mhm.
grew up in separate towns. Like we didn't have this ability to form this strong bond when we were growing up. And then when I really got close with you, both in our later 20s, it
Mhm.
was like the woman I know today, it's amazing to me that that's what you went through. And I think that's why your story is so inspiring to me, because you used that experience and you became 100,000 times better because of it. And I
Mhm.
respect the hell out of you for it. And everything that you've been through since then, like I think it's really powerful for not only your followers, but anybody else that's listening to this episode to realize like you can take charge of your own life. You just have to recognize how powerful you truly are. So there you have it. I hope you got just as much out of this episode as I did. I am so excited to continue next Monday as Jess tells us all about her weight loss journey, how she built a powerful community, and tips she has for gaining self-confidence. Also, Jess and I have teamed up on social media to do a giveaway, so be sure to check out our Instagram for more details. Remember, you are so much more than whatever label has been placed upon you. We'll see you next week.